Smash roster speculation has followed a lot of different trends and themes across the series' history. We've seen fans focus on their childhood favorites, on newly relevant characters with a lot of moveset potential, on third parties when the topic comes up, etc. But speculation for Ultimate, especially its DLC, has been another beast entirely. A combination of hype culture and fixation on specific statements and creative decisions has taken a fandom already prone to jumping to conclusions and left them laser focused on the absolute biggest names in gaming and not much else. There's an appeal to the idea that pulls people in. We've had several old favorites finally make it in already, leaving some fans to wonder if theirs could happen next. The surprise factor of each reveal trailer leaves others anxiously awaiting the next, hoping to have their minds blown all over again. Others still see all these big names rubbing shoulders in ways they never thought possible and want to see just how wild this crossover can get. But with this focus comes its own problems. Characters who aren't considered massive icons get brushed aside, even though Sakurai and the devs do look at lesser-known figures. The whole concept of who counts as iconic varies wildly from person to person. But most importantly, it's leading speculators to assume anyone who is a big figure must be a frontrunner, when the truth isn't so simple. This is Challenger Approaching, where we take a character who isn't playable in Smash yet and go deep into detail on what they could be like if they got in for real. Our challenger this time is someone who was one of the biggest names in gaming during his heyday, and newfound relevance has put him at the front of Smash talk lately on name alone. But just what are his actual chances, and what potential does he have as a fighter? Crash! Crash Bandicoot is the main character of the series of the same name, a former flagship franchise for the Sony PlayStation with a roller coaster of a history. Crash himself began life as an ordinary Bandicoot inhabiting the jungles on Insanity Island, until one fateful day when he was captured by one Dr. Neo Cortex. As part of the Mad Doctor's plot for world domination, Crash was mutated to gain a humanoid form and self-awareness, then put through rigorous tests and experiments in hopes of making him the commander of an unstoppable mutant army. But after an attempt to brainwash him failed when the machine meant to do so rejected him, Crash was deemed a failure and tossed out, which prompted him to run, jump, and spin his way back to Cortex's castle to put an end to the villain's machinations and rescue his obligatory love interest. It was the 90s. Ever since, Crash has been at work platforming through levels, destroying crates, and stopping Cortex and any other bad guys who would threaten the world, or universe, or all of reality. Poor guy just can't get any rest. With a unique style of 3D platforming, challenging gameplay, and the right amount of cartoony, slapstick humor to get a laugh even after dying for the umpteenth time, Crash's original run on the PS1 was a hit, spawning a full trilogy and a couple spin-offs. It also put the Bandicoot front and center in the console wars and positioned him as a direct rival to Mario, one Sony loved accentuating. But the new millennium was a rocky one for Crash, as developer Naughty Dog lost control of their IP and their many successors could never quite match the highs of the original trilogy, no matter how many consoles they put him on or how experimental his games got. That is, until the surprise announcement in 2017 of a compilation remake of his first 3 games made Crash mainstream again for the first time in ages. Insane Trilogy proved such a success that it led to development of his first brand new mainline title in a very long time. And while they were timed exclusives for Sony's consoles, both games later found their way to other platforms, including the Nintendo Switch. A once great gaming icon with newfound relevance and Switch presence feels like such a perfect combination that he's become a near constant figure in Smash speculation, with many fans convinced he has to be one of the 2 remaining DLC fighters. But despite how exciting or mind-blowing the idea might be, we need to look at the big picture. For one, characters from Western developers are going to be harder to work with for a Japanese dev team. We've only seen 2 Western guest fighters so far, both from Microsoft. And while Crash is a rare example of a Western character with a sizable Japanese fanbase, it's still a hurdle that other characters don't have. Secondly, Smash reveal cycles have usually dropped their big bombshell reveals around the halfway mark or a little past it, and we're past that midpoint climax now for Fighters Pass 2. Sure, the fact that Crash 4 released so recently means maybe he had to be pushed back this far so content from it could be used, but I don't know if we can count on another huge reveal this late. All of this paints Crash as a character with a plausible chance, but despite what you might see elsewhere, he's not a shoo-in. So keep in mind as we look closer that his inclusion is just one of several possible timelines. But now, let's peer into one of those timelines. What would Crash Bandicoot be like in Smash? Crash's design has had multiple iterations across the years, but I could see a Smash rendition going with his Crash 4 design. It's his most recent mainline game, and far as I'm aware, the design isn't divisive enough to make them want to draw inspiration from elsewhere. I could see a touch-up here or there to suit Smash's art style better, but it's a strong starting point. Crash's animations could also build off his newest outings, along with stuff he's had basically this whole time, like his bent-over crouch and slow crawl, the jump animation he's basically always had, complete with a flip during his double jump, or even a canned animation where his shoes fly up after he falls in a pit. And of course he'd say his classic, "Whoa!" whenever he gets hit particularly hard. Like I might say, make sure to subscribe so you know when more videos are out. Okay, that was awkward. For Crash's alternate colors, we can start with a few unlockable skins he's had that alter his color scheme. These are recent recurring ones in particular. Could also have palettes based on the TNT or Nitro crates, or even one inspired by Cortex himself. If they really wanted to go all out, they could straight up lift a full costume from one of Crash's recent titles, or have one based on his classic design as long as the hitboxes still line up correctly. There's one more thing we should touch on. Crash's sister Coco has been playable in several games ever since Crash 3, including all of the modern ones. She functions identically to Crash in most of them, so would she work as her own set of alts like Alex does for Steve? On one hand, more playable characters couldn't hurt, and having another female character on the roster would be kinda neat. However, Crash and Coco have notably different body proportions, and while a platformer can get away with giving them identical hitboxes, it'd be a lot harder to do in a fighting game that requires you stick as close to the model as possible for balancing reasons. Add the fact that Coco actually has a few unique animations compared to Crash, and honestly, I'm not very confident on the idea. Sorry. Next up, Crash's attributes and stats. Starting with a fighting style we want to ensure truly fits him as a character. Guest fighters in particular usually feel like they were lifted straight out of their games, so we want playing as Crash to feel the same way. I settled on something designed to encourage thinking the way you do when playing Crash's most famous titles. The brunt of their challenge comes from crossing gauntlets of platforms and pits and enemies, requiring you use the right moves with the right timing to make it through unscathed. His fighting style here encourages observing opponents the same way. Watch their habits closely, pick up on the openings in their attacks, then strike when they're vulnerable and turn the tables on them. It's a classic bait and punish playstyle with a defensive lean added on. Crash would rather not get maimed or killed, so playing carefully to avoid unnecessary damage instead of running in and taking huge risks is his kind of thing. On to Crash's full stats, and as you can see, we have a pretty average size overall. A head taller than Mario, but shorter than the more realistically proportioned characters. He does get more compact when he crouches or crawls, though not super flat like Kirby or anything. His weight's also middle of the line, letting him take a decent amount of punishment, but not enough to face tank his way to wins. Crash's mobility is also pretty middling, with a couple exceptions and a couple quirks. His run speed and initial dash, based on the sprint from Crash 3, are below average, but his walk, based on his default movement speed, is notably fast. This makes walking a legitimately useful option for him for positioning and approaching. His airspeed looks really good at a glance, a top 15 in the game at its cap, but his air movement works like it does in his games, with low air acceleration but very high deceleration. Takes a moment for him to get going in the air, but he can stop on a dime. Makes approaching from the air more difficult than you'd expect, but it also gives him unique movement mix-ups for faking opponents out. His fall speed is a half floaty, making him harder to combo but easier to juggle. It also helps boost his recovery since he doesn't fall to his death as quickly. Crash may not like fighting, but all these training experiments from Cortex have left him very capable of defending himself. His attacks have above average speed and damage output, and some legitimately great combo potential. His punishes in particular can really rack up damage, especially at low percents. But when it comes to closing out stocks, Crash is one of those characters whose KO options are all flawed. He has a few moves that kill early but basically require a hard read for them to hit, and others that are more reliable but won't get the job done until late. He's a pacifist by nature, so it's not his area of expertise. We have his looks and stats hammered down, so now let's take a look at Crash's moveset. Just what is he capable of? We begin with his basic attacks, and a jab combo where he swipes forward with one hand, then the other, then finishes with a quick roundhouse kick. Inspired by his basic combo in Crash of the Titans, once you unlock the roundhouse, it's a fairly typical combo with average-ish startup, above average knockback at the end, and above average end lag. Useful, but don't just throw it out. Crash's forward tilt has him swing around and perform a sideways punch using whichever arm is currently facing away from the camera. This one's an original move that feels like it'd come naturally, and it has decent range and solid damage but subpar startup. Like with his jab, don't just fish with it. Crash's up tilt is more involved, having him duck a little, put his hands above his head with palms facing up, and push straight upward. This attempt to get anyone nearby off him and save his own skin is also a very effective combo starter in anti-air that he can follow up with certain aerials or other moves through mid-percents. The hitbox is on the narrow side though, so it doesn't pressure platforms very well. Crash's down tilt has him sweep one hand across the ground while in a crouching position while still covering himself with the other. Like with his up tilt, it comes off like he's trying to protect himself more than anything. Also like his up tilt, it's a competent combo move, dealing short diagonal knockback that lets him follow it up with a forward or back air for a while. Its actual speed is pretty average, making it work best when reacting to something an opponent does. How about something more well-known? Crash's dash attack is the sliding kick he's had since his second game. Too iconic for us not to work it in somehow, and since Crash has to be moving to use it in his games, it's his dash attack here and not his down tilt. Functionally, it's similar to Mario's, a long-lasting burst option that sends people forward when it hits. Crash does move faster than Mario does, and it can actually kill at higher percents, but it also has more end lag than Mario's, and Crash comes to a dead stop at the end just like in his games. If those seem kinda basic, then brace yourself, because Crash's smash attacks are unconventional. Starting with a forward smash where, am I reading this right? A reinforced locked crate spawns in midair in front of Crash, he catches it on reflex, then he does his best attempt to heave it forward. This move doesn't have a hitbox until Crash tries to throw the crate, and it only goes a little less than a dash length before hitting the ground with a clang and poofing out of existence. But if it does hit someone, the sheer weight of the thing ensures it hurts. It can also be tossed off a ledge, but it's not the greatest of that since it's super telegraphed, and the crate vanishes pretty quickly after falling past its starting height. Crash's up smash summons in a different crate, and fortunately it's less heavy. Unfortunately, it's a flamethrower crate from Crash 4, and it's primed to activate. Crash quickly flings it upward with both hands, where it hangs in midair and spews fire in a plus-shaped pattern. Another slow but powerful smash attack, the crate goes off about a jump height above Crash and deals a weaker hit if the crate touches someone before it starts spewing fiery death. It's particularly good at covering smaller platforms, but so slow to come out that it's more for reads or tech chases from below. Rounding the set out is a down smash that, makes a nitro crate appear a step in front of Crash's feet. The poor guy panics, for understandable reasons, and ducks and covers in the other direction just in time before the crate explodes. It's kinda like Mewtwo's down smash in function, a single powerful blast in front of Crash that doesn't hit behind him at all. Unusually, if something hits the nitro crate after it spawns but before it explodes, it goes off early and still does damage. But Crash also gets hit, making this very risky to use if he's at higher percents. Who's making all these dangerous crates appear anyway? Is Cortex trying to temporarily help Crash by ensuring no one else gets to defeat him? Now for Crash's aerials, which should hopefully involve less risk of serious injury. His neutral air has him kick outward with both feet at once, hitting in front and behind him at the same time. Inspired by his double jump animation from Crash 3 when not moving, it covers him pretty well with above average range for his standards and even some decent power, but it's also kinda slow to come out. Don't worry, he has a faster option when he needs one. Meanwhile, Crash's forward air has him swing one leg in front of him for a sideways kick. It's sorta like a counterpart to his forward tilt, boasts solid range and speed, and while it doesn't kill on stage at any meaningful percent, its knockback has a low enough angle to punt opponents off stage and edgeguard effectively. Crash's back air is a drop kick based on another move he has in Crash of the Titans. Not a whole lot to say about this one. It's decently fast with above average power like pretty much every other drop kick back air in Ultimate. It's Crash's go-to finisher when his laggy smash attacks aren't hitting, though it still won't kill until 140 or so at mid-stage and maybe 115 at the ledge. His up air is a flip kick that comes from, of all places, his playable appearance in Skylanders, a combo move at low percents, but its knockback growth puts a stop to that pretty quickly and makes it more for keeping opponents airborne. It does kill eventually, but don't expect it to net any knockouts until past 150. Alright Crash fans, you saw this down air coming, right? The body slam has Crash flop over and plummet straight down, damaging anything in the way. It works like the other ground pound type down airs, and just like them, it's high commitment and designed for situational use to catch an opponent off guard, or else they'll just shield it and hit you afterward. Crash's grab game is a key part of his moveset, since it lets him punish opponents for sitting in their shields. His grab animation has him reach forward with both hands to try and grapple someone nearby. It's got above average range for a hand-to-hand fighter, but the startup on his standing grab in particular is subpar. But his dash and pivot grabs have more normal frame data and keep that range. When he does get his hands on someone, Crash's pummel has him perform a headbutt. That's one way to use your head. Then his forward throw has him shove his opponent forward for positional advantage. His back throw has him spin around once and hurl them backward. Technically a kill throw, but only near the ledge and not until past 160, so not worth relying on. Crash's up throw has him fling the enemy skyward just like the flamethrower crate in his up smash, with more knockback, but his down throw has him shove the opponent to the ground and bounce on them like he does a crater enemy in his games. This deals low enough knockback to be a very good combo starter, leading into follow-ups as late as 70 or 80%. Finally, a few extra ideas, like a victory animation that uses a variant of the classic Crash dance, or another where he breaks a nearby crate, spawning a lump of fruit that he picks up and takes a bite out of. Or how about a few taunts, like one where he performs a quick breakdance move, a hidden talent of his, one where he pulls out a smaller lump of fruit and rolls it across his shoulders before catching it with his other hand, and one where he breathes a sigh of relief that he's managed to survive so far. And now for Crash's special moves. Let's round this moveset out. What to begin with for his neutral special? If only there was some signature move we could reliably place here. Something like... as if it could be anything else. Crash's spin is his main form of attack in his games, and his quickest means of destroying crates that don't require other methods. It's pretty much the thing he's known for most. Mario jumps really high, Sonic curls into a ball, Crash spins. In Smash, pressing the B button has Crash, spin in place. But there's a twist. 2 variations based on how long you press the button for. Based on how his spin in some of his games has 2 different hitboxes based on if you're moving or standing still. For our version, simply tapping B has Crash perform a quick, short-ranged, short-lasting spin with his arms held down at his sides. But if you hold it instead, Crash brings his arms out after a few frames for an extended version with a second hit that lasts longer and with greater reach. But you're also vulnerable for longer afterward. The spin is a cornerstone of Crash's moveset. Just like in his home series, he gets a lot of mileage out of this one seemingly simple technique. The tap version is a fast, low-commitment pressure breaker, close-ranged punish, especially out of shield, and even combos into things at lower percents. The held version clears space around you, finishes combos or strings, and can intercept linear recoveries if you spin right in their flight path. But each version also has downsides. The quick spin has too little range to actually cover Crash completely, so it can't protect him from enemy attacks, while the full spin does have enough reach to contest enemy attacks, but is much more punishable if it doesn't hit. That's the obvious one down, but what about Crash's side special? For this one, we're calling in a friend. Crash's sort of pet, Polar, first appeared in certain levels in Crash 2, giving him a bareback ride through dangerous terrain. Levels where you ride on different animals are a recurring thing in Crash's mainline titles, so why not tap into that here? On use, Polar appears a dash length behind Crash and immediately charges forward, bowling the Bandicoot up and over and onto Polar's back in the process. Anyone caught in the way as they're on the move takes a pretty strong hit to the face. But that's not all. You have a few extra options once the little guy starts running. Press down or a shield button and the duo skids to a stop and Crash hops off safely. Press a jump button and Crash leaps off Polar with the height of a full hop but extra end lag. Press an attack button and Polar stops suddenly and flings Crash forward like at the end of his levels in Crash 2, dealing a second strong hit, but Crash himself is wide open even longer afterward. Polar disappears right after any of these. No matter what, summoning Polar gives Crash a gap closer with additional options while it's going. But the move itself is a big commitment no matter what you choose, so you'd have to think ahead. It'd be great for catching landings or plowing into opponents who themselves commit to something they shouldn't have. It's also one of Crash's best non-smash attack kill moves, though it's so telegraphed that it'd only work in certain situations. It'd also be one of his 2 recovery options. What's the other one? More crate shenanigans. Bounce crates, also known as arrow crates, are a unique type that's been around since Crash 1. Instead of breaking when you jump on them, they bounce Crash into the air like trampolines. Some trickier platforming segments in his games are built around this. Using this move has a wooden bounce crate spawned just below Crash's feet, and he bounces off it and springs upward. The distance on this one is actually pretty legit, complete with the extra visual effect when you get a full bounce off one in Crash 4. However, Crash's airspeed actually goes down a little during his ascent, something else that happens in his games. But that's not as bad as it sounds, because using a bounce crate doesn't put Crash into freefall. You're free to use other options afterward. An interesting recovery move on its own, the bounce crate's true strength lies in the ability to mix and match it with Crash's other recovery options, double jump, side special, etc., for a Swiss Army knife of tools off stage that make him deceptively difficult to edgeguard if you keep mixing up what you use when. That said, this move has one big downside. No hitbox at any point, meaning you have to avoid edgeguard attempts off stage instead of going through them. The crate itself breaks on its own shortly after Crash bounces off it, and it does so prematurely if anyone touches it from the side or below. No cheesing opponents' recoveries with this one. There's one more thing we really should include, and Crash's down special is a perfect place for it. There it is. Another Crash staple since the first game, jumping on a TNT crate activates a timer that makes it blow up once it counts down to 0. Best not be nearby when it goes off. On use, a TNT crate spawns in at Crash's feet and immediately starts to tick down from 3, causing him to briefly freak out before regaining his composure and being able to move again. Behaving exactly like in Crash's games, once the timer's up, or it gets hit with a not weak attack, it creates a hard-hitting explosion with a blast radius a little smaller than Steve's explosives. But what makes this move not just a knockoff of Steve's TNT? Just like in Crash's games, TNT crates can be spawned in midair and will stay there instead of falling down. Take that, laws of physics. A delayed trap and source of temporary stage control since everyone can clearly see when it's going to go off. TNT crates give Crash a way to stop opponents from, ironically, running away and not fighting him. They're also another strong yet inconsistent kill option, though throwing someone into one right as it goes off is a valid tactic. But using them haphazardly is a risk to you as well, since Crash himself takes full damage from them. You also can only have one active at a time, and the explosion from a crate in midair is a little smaller and weaker than a grounded one. And now for Crash's final smash. Took some time to narrow down what to use here, especially with Ultimate streamlining their design options. What I settled on was a finisher that brings in some more help. Empowered by the Smash Ball, Crash calls out to somewhere and a dimensional rift appears immediately in front of him, pulling in anyone close by. From there, a cinematic kicks in where each of Crash's traveling companions from his most recent outing take turns laying the smackdown on anyone caught within the rift. First, Coco appears and spins into them. Then Dingodile bludgeons them with his blunderbuss, followed by the alternate timeline version of Tawna whacking them with a roundhouse kick. Then Cortex blasts them with his ray gun, with a reluctant expression on his face. Finally, Crash himself jumps in, winds up as the Guardian Mask Aku Aku empowers him even further, and he unleashes a full-powered Death Tornado spin on his opponents for the finishing blow. This is what Crash Bandicoot could be like in Smash. A mutated marsupial dragged from his peaceful life time and again to oppose his former master's malevolent machinations. Through his finely honed platforming skills and knack for evading certain death, he may yet gain a chance to settle an inter-console rivalry of 25 years, this time on friendlier terms. Crash's moveset gives him a well-rounded, though defensively leaning, set of tools that work in many different situations. Rare is the occasion where he doesn't have something he can do. His legitimately good damage output and combo potential let him rack up damage on opponents with little trouble by capitalizing when they leave themselves open. And he fares pretty well against the aggressive, rushdown focused fighting styles that are so popular, forcing them to try something less straightforward. However, the range on most of Crash's moveset is okay at best, which runs him into trouble against characters with better reach, especially if a sword is involved. His middling grounded mobility, along with air movement that only shines over long distances, means he can also struggle to get going against some types of zoning. And his knockout moves are all flawed in some way. Unwieldy and difficult to hit with, easy to see coming, or only able to finish the job at very high percents. Well, that was different. While I think a lot of the talk of Crash being a frontrunner is people hyping each other up too much, it did make me want to try building a moveset for him. As someone who didn't get into the series until Insane Trilogy, I have a different perspective than more long-term fans, hopefully not too flawed of one. There were a few things I looked into that didn't make it into the final concept. The Fruit Bazooka from Crash 3 was another option for his side special that I passed on because I wanted the moveset to be more active and less focused on zoning. I looked into making the Death Tornado spin part of the neutral special, but it felt like it strayed too close to Meta Knight's Mach Tornado. And Aku Aku almost ended up part of a down special mechanic before I found a way to make the TNT Crate stand out better. It can be fun to imagine a favorite character joining the ranks of Smash, and there's an appeal to seeing someone you think doesn't get their fair credit join the roster and finally receive that respect. But we gotta remember that newcomers are chosen for more reasons than just collecting names, and being a gaming icon, whether one of the modern day or a foregone era, doesn't guarantee someone will make it in, nor does not getting in mean they suddenly don't matter. The truth, like Crash's now multiverse after his newest outing, is more complicated than that. Special thanks to these people here for helping make this video happen. Thanks in particular to my patrons for their continued support. So, until next time, I missed one crate? How did I miss one crate? Did they hide it off screen again?